You know, a lot of people are applying for what's called a decline in value reassessment on their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people who have bought homes in recent years are, you know, basically appealing to the government as well as their right for a lower assessment. So both the sales tax, which Bruce is making a very important point, cities in California rely on the sales tax. So their sales taxes are being hit and their property taxes will be reduced as well as counties have to you know, decline the assessments on. So we're really looking at, I think, an unprecedented situation. I mean, you know, I wasn't around for the 30s, and Bruce, you were not either, but we're looking at maybe something between what we had in the 90s and something more severe in the 1930s. It's really pretty scary.
Well, Bruce, are you seeing any effects that Prop 13 is having in the Valley, per se?
Not really, not for Prop 13. I mean, it's just, again, the big debate that we hear continually is the inability of cities and counties to do anything to change the ratio of property tax revenue that they're getting, simply because they have no vote on it, they have no say-so on it. So it forces the cities and the counties, a lot of these local municipalities, to look at other sources of revenue to either increase their revenue stream to keep their service level at the same level it has been, or they're looking at some serious cutbacks. You know, and we're talking. I'm also, last year and this year, chairman of a statewide group, the California Association for Local Economic Development, CalEd, and we're hearing from some of our smaller cities up and down the state of California that, you know, some of their sales tax revenues are down 50%. Well, you can't take that much revenue out of a local operating government and expect them to continue providing the service level that they have. So they're either going to have to, you know, the cities are going to have to start getting by with less, doing you know, the same with less, or they're going to have to figure out where that revenue replacement's going to come from.
You know, the big expenditures for city are you know, police and fire.
Yep.
I mean, that's the physical security of, so you'll be compromising the physical security of California's communities because that's where the cuts can, you know, people are going to be paying more in user fees, utility taxes, and things like that. But it reminds me of another important point about Prop 13, is that it was not just about money. Prop 13 also left a legacy of a 2/3 requirement
Yep.
to raise taxes. So even making up for those revenues is now, you know, California is the only state in the nation where you have 2/3 for the budget and 2/3 for many of the taxes you have. So simply generating the revenues that Bruce is talking about is a heck of a trick in California.
So leading into that, how do California cities compare to other cities across the nation in terms of their budgets and revenue?
Well, everybody's in a lot of pain right now. I mean, anywhere you go, they're having basically the same discussion. Although in other places you don't have the 2/3 requirement for taxes. Maybe
they have a little bit more control over what they can do.
And they are more tied to the property tax. So the property tax historically in the United States is more or less about 40%. 50% of local government budgets. In California, it's more like 20%.
Right.
And properties, we've seen a historic drop in property, but property is typically more stable than sales taxes, which is more tied to, you know, economic cycles, kind of up and down. So we're having a more difficult time than most other states and localities across the country.
Okay. So I know a lot of people when they hear about the state budget, a lot of people think that we spend too much money worrying about illegal immigration. How does that issue affect the budget? Do we really spend too much money on it, or is it just overstated that way?
Bruce?
I think most of the burden for enforcing you know, our border laws, the existing laws that are in place, are federally driven laws. They're not state laws. I mean, the state has a certain amount of burden because the feds impose that back on the state of California. But as an overall percentage of budget, it's pretty much an insignificant amount. I don't think there's that much impact in the current budget. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's a huge number. And I'm not quite sure what we would do to change that scenario. I mean, there's, you know, two sides to that coin. If you're not enforcing the laws that are there, what's the backside economic impact of not being able to collect taxes from people that are, earning money here and not paying their fair share of taxes. And I don't know, I'm not weighing in on the argument pro or con. It's just I'm not sure how that fits into the overall economic equation.
Okay. So how is California making up for their losses in revenue right now?
Right now they're not. Right now we aren't. I mean, we have no magic wand to wave and open up the money tree. Again, back to my earlier point, we either have to figure out how to cut costs, which means reducing services and cutting employees, or increasing taxes. There's no two ways around it. And I think the proposal that we had coming through the legislature on this last balanced budget was a little bit of both, but I don't think it was enough of either to make, we haven't eliminated that deficit. So we're still looking at the same issues, the same problems, and they're just going to renew themselves all over again when we get into next year's budget.
Yeah, and the politics is now very bitter. I mean, we just barely passed this budget, and the Republican Party has basically made a tax pledge: we won't raise taxes, and then a few,
it broke stream.
Right, but those people will be under more pressure, and so it's not clear to me that you're going to be able to get to even replicate the success, if you want to call it that, that we've had over the last few weeks. So. Again, as Bruce said, it's either raising taxes or raising money or cutting services.
And Mike, weighing in on another point, which is my background, and that's this whole issue of economic viability and vitality in the state of California. Your point about the state of California's economy being the 8th, 9th, or 10th, depending on whose numbers you look at, strongest economy in the world. We're not putting anything back into developing that economy. We're not, as a state, we do absolutely nothing to attract business. In fact, we do just the opposite. We scare away more business. We collectively, as the state of California, as in government, do more to discourage businesses from moving here or staying here than we ever do to encourage them to come in. And until we have a major sea change in that attitude and that philosophy of, oh, business will always come here because it's California, well, that theory is only going to hold true for so long. It's the goose that laid the golden egg. You can only squeeze so many eggs out of that goose before something starts to give. And I'm really afraid that from a long-term standpoint, if we don't start to reinvest in the economic stability of this state, we're going to be in even serious trouble going forward.
I would add, the big picture here is that California has lost a lot of the middle-class manufacturing jobs.
Right.
There's no place that better illustrates that point than the San Fernando Valley. You used to be able to, graduate from high school, work for GM, and so California needs to think strategically, as Bruce is suggesting, at a state and a local level about economic development and how to do that. And I guess, organizations such as Bruce's, but all the way up the chain, all the way up to the federal level, have to figure out how do we rebuild that middle class, because without it, problems are just going to get worse.
Well, thank you for coming. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you for watching. I'm Mike Tersigni, and this is On Point.